We're gonna go live on the webinar. It's gonna be a little bit early, and can you click go live to YouTube already? Or
yeah, I got us going live to YouTube.
Okay, great. And then just a reminder, whatever you want people to see of your name, just edit by clicking the 3 dots and typing rename. So I'll put in my pronouns.
Today is Tuesday, right?
Yes.
Sure, I'm pulling up the right video.
Okay. You got that?
And reminder to close your Teams.
Oh yeah, because otherwise then.
Now, and Outlook.
You don't want all my notifications coming in?
Did everyone check for updates too before you came on?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And Jennifer, could you send the document?
One more time, you got it. I'm gonna share the viewer only version.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So as we're continuing to get ready, the document that's in the chat is what we're going to be talking about, and I invite you to pull it up. Maybe we could screen share and kind of go through it here. Hold on a second. Here it is. Your Backstage pass. All right. So when we go live, here's some of our notes. When we officially go live, I'm gonna welcome, say hello to everyone, invite people to kind of see this backstage action that you can only access on the recording if you're not here right now. This Google Doc link, which is hopefully, I'm going to make it so we can comment, but not it's view. Perfect. You already did it. Jennifer, you're on top of everything and beyond. I'll do some introductions, and we'll go over some of the best practices of what we're doing and how we're doing it. We'll talk about some of the closed captioning, and then about 10 minutes to 4, so that's about 20 minutes of conversation, we're going to switch to the metrics. Laurel is going to share her screen, give a presentation. Phiwa's in conversation with Laurel, and wrapping up that section by talking, I like how you added that in there, Laurel, wrapping up that section by talking about how to promote webinars, and then doing some Q&A. So Taylor, when we get to after we're talking about promoting webinars, that's the cue to set up Menti and have that going, and we'll do Q&A for anybody who's watching and what they may or may not want to know. I'll go through the call to offering and any announcements that we have, including the exciting webinar happening on Thursday. And at the end, Anissa, is it okay if I ask you to pray us out at the very end?
Absolutely.
Fantastic. Oh, I'm nervous. I still get nervous.
Can I test my audio and my screen share, please?
Yes. Make sure that you click have the audio going and optimize for video. God is calling
to us all. Audio sounds good.
Yeah, I like it.
Thank you.
Question about how you want me to handle the Q&A. Do you want to save that all for the end? And I've done it a couple of different ways. I've sent them to individual people, or I've read them aloud. Do we have a preference?
So we've usually just keep an eye on it as people are in the chat. If you can, start us off by talking about the Q&A in the chat, and any questions that come through the chat, send to Q&A. And then when we've gotten to that section, At this point, usually I'll pull them out and into conversation. If you can
Okay.
alert me or specific people privately via chat what's coming through, that'll be helpful to plan it
Okay.
in.
All right. I just want to make sure that's still what you wanted me all to do.
That would be brilliant. So a couple of reminders as we're going live. Usually we do these webinars in speaker view. And what that means is that people who are watching only see the person who's talking. They don't see us in gallery view. So there's a couple of implications for our time together because of that. The first is that as we're talking, if you are someone who has an appreciative if you are someone who has an enthusiastic yes when something is said you agree with, or if you are someone who has a sneeze, any of these things will bring your face to the screen if you are not muted. So please be attentive to being muted when you are not talking. And that's how we usually do the webinars. That also means that when we do the introduction, there needs to be an audible back and forth. So I'll do a quick introduction of you, and then if you can just say like happy to be here, or coming from Cleveland, or it's a good day to be alive, anything that you might add into what I have named you as, then that would be very helpful. In this webinar, we are in gallery view. So just be aware that which is on screen is on screen, that anyone can see as your pets and children and delight walks across the keyboard. So
Laurel, can you please test your screen share, please?
Sure thing.
Thank you.
All right, so I am pretending to narrate as I will so that I can show everyone the thing. And I should enter full screen before I start sharing. Remember that for a little bit later. So here's my little screen, and I've got a little video that I'm showing you, and I'm speaking over it. I'm narrating. You can
And
see
you
how
sound wonderful. Thank
excellent.
you.
Thank you.
Oh, look at it go. Thank you. I'm excited.
We should probably remind people that are watching on YouTube, since I've already shared the link to Facebook and Twitter, that we are here and we're giving you an extra special Backstage pass before our webinars would go live, or before your worship service or event would go live. So this part is what we usually do on every Tuesday and Thursday, and you're getting a glimpse into it even before we start.
Welcome backstage. Don't touch any props. Thank you.
Oh, I already touched a bunch of props. I'm sorry.
Oh, see,
You don't look or sound sorry. But also, if you need to plug in your computer, don't forget to do that. I'm about to do that right now.
I'm getting myself oriented with all of the various things that we're using.
Yeah, I'm trying to share the YouTube link to my Facebook. Give me a second.
But also, if you need to plug in.
Oh, there we go.
And I'm trying to figure out what I don't need to look at so that I can have all the windows open that I need open.
I just heard me.
How'd you sound?
Like me, mostly. Cool, cool.
I swear I still get the jitters before we go live. Even knowing that we're like intentionally backstage and like you all are seeing what we're doing. I'm like, oh, I'm still nervous. I imagine this is what pastors feel like. I mean, it is, because we're preaching. We're pastoring every day. Every time. And feels like a Sunday in these days.
I always look at the attendees to see if there's anyone there that I know. I don't know why. It doesn't change anything, but I do.
Oh, I'm actively not looking at it, or the number that keeps showing up. Yeah.
All right, so we've got the Google Doc that we are going to use throughout.
And the API token was dropped, Laurel. Thank you.
I shared the API token with Verbit. And for those watching, there are many different companies that provide closed captioning service, and definitely do your own research if that's something that you want to use. And we'll get into other options about that later too, so that'll be fun. But theoretically, you know, only the host can share an API token. That's why I had to do it and why no one else could. A little extra special behind the scenes action there.
I had to walk the dog before this, and it was like, hurry up, let's go, because like I have to do this thing. And I'm normally like, let her out the door and she can bark and do whatever she wants because my mic is typically off. So I felt extra pressure today to like make sure she was walked and like hidden away.
Mine is still behind me, but he's pretty tired. I played with him in the backyard first, so we'll see.
Mine is just about a yard behind this screen here, snoozing on the couch, trying to find some sunlight to put her face in.
I want to, before we go live, I want to say to all of you, thank you so much for saying yes to experimenting in this way. Thank you for coming in the whole human version of who you are, with the ways in which we've messed it up and the ways in which we've learned and the ways in which we're doing this better together, for having done it and being willing to share that learning as a resource for the whole of the denomination and anyone beyond. I know that there's a lot of people that are with us every single week who watch, whether in live as we're going or in the recordings, and your willingness to offer your expertise and your and the places where you're not for others to learn is such a gift. So thank you for saying yes. And especially thank you to Laurel and Jennifer and Anissa and Taylor, who are doing some of the tech back end. I know, Phiwa, you've been on webinars before on the front end. So, but for those of you who are usually in the background and like behind the curtain, thank you for coming in and being willing to show what you're doing. We've had so many people ask about how we're pulling it off. We thought it would be worth it and worth our collective energy to just show you how we're doing this, because we're all learning by doing. 2020. So thank you. You know, we've got 3 minutes before we show the beginning video. So if you will take a deep breath with me, I'm gonna give a little prayer, I think, at least for my nerves, that helps me calm down. So let's breathe together. Holy One, I pray that you are present with us this day, that you are here between the airwaves, that you are connecting us digitally across space and time for those that are watching in thereafter. I pray that the things that we have learned will be of use to you and to the denomination and the church writ large, that we may ever be attentive to your will for this world, that we may ever be breathing deeply alongside you and creating a world where justice is flowing consistently for all people and equity is present in ways that one's life is not determined by any other factor than their belovedness in your eyes. So God, be with us as we search and find the words, as we reveal what is happening backstage, as we breathe together in hopes that we may collectively continue to be your church here on earth and continue to co-create heaven here on earth as you wish for it in the beyond. I pray all this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
you tell? I'm like blushing, nervous.
Hey, speaking of Taylor, does Taylor have share access?
Let me check. Okay, we've got, yep, all panelists will be able to share. Thanks for the
Including me.
reminder. All panelists.
you.
No, Phiwa, you're not allowed to share.
Technically, you have the
It's safer for
ability,
everyone.
but you don't have the permission.
I'm ready to touch all the props, is what
Please
I'm
don't touch all the buttons. Touch none of the buttons, please.
Yeah, before I know we got 1 minute until we do the 5-minute countdown, but I'm gonna tell that story for learning without names attached. Is that in the before, people who are made hosts, there's a little toggle up at the front that you're like you can talk it out before you hit go live and everyone sees it. And in the early days of when we were learning, we would make people hosts, and then people are like, great, okay, I got it, click, go live. What? So we were accidentally live before we meant to be, and it was like all of the planning that would have happened without an audience was suddenly happening. Like, oh, okay, go off screen, go to the chat, we'll figure out what needs to happen.
We weren't gonna name any names.
I don't care. I'm good. As my mother always says, I won't tell you their name, but her initials are Anissa Glaser-Bacon.
Oh my goodness, Mom.
Oh,
If it
oh,
helps
bless.
any, I'm a little starstruck to find out it was you, because like that's been like the warning at all these.
Yeah, it's totally me.
It's inside
totally
joke.
me.
It's a great time.
You can send me your autograph, that'd be great.
Yeah,
Okay, I can
let's
do
do
that.
that. Autograph
On that
her
note,
the Zoom window or something.
beloveds of God, it is 25 of. We're going to switch to the going live. And I know that if you are not sharing your screen, just turn off all the cameras. Otherwise, your little smiling picture is going to be the one that shows up in the share. So usually that's me and I'm okay with it, but I want to say that we can turn off our pictures and there's nobody's little smiling picture in the share. So ready when you are, Jennifer. Thank you so much.
God is calling to her people. God is calling to us all. Are we listening? God is still speaking. God is calling to us all. I will pour out my spirit. I will pour out my power. Share my dreaming, shower you with visions. I will pour out my power. Pour out justice overflowing. Pour out mercy for this hour. Pour compassion on your people. Let your spirit flow with power.
Siblings and sisters and brothers in Christ, welcome to Tuesdays for Nurture. Tuesdays for Nurture is a webinar series where we faithfully focus on education for the people of God. And we pull together all sorts of different things, from interviews of key leaders to faith-filled politics to how-tos in congregational life, and the impacts of current realities on the church as a whole will be featured. And every webinar has clear suggestions on Tuesdays about what you can do to change the church and the world towards the world God imagines for us. So as everyone who is participating is turning back on their video, I want to let you know that if you are just joining us now, then we also started recording. We opened the webinar a half an hour early, and in the recording, which is on YouTube, you'll see a half an hour of us getting ready, because part of that we think is good learning too. Today is called Your Backstage Pass, and we are joined by the Center for Analytics, Research and Development and Data, and the tech team of our webinars to learn how are we doing this. We've compiled best practice documents to share with you. We're navigating Zoom and other platforms and all of their various consistent ongoing updates, always right before we go live. And we are still learning as we go. So we're going to talk about how this happens. And as we're doing that, I want to introduce to you the people who will be present alongside us on the way. So featuring the innovativeness of Reverend Phiwa Langeni.
Good greetings, everybody. It's good to be here. And I say here, I'm physically in Lansing, Michigan, though I'm here across the digital waves with all of you. It's great to be with you.
Featuring the off-camera wisdom of Taylor Russell, whose name you may have seen scrolling through the chat.
happy day. Welcome, happy to be here.
The social media and tech savviness of Laurel Steinitz.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for inviting me.
The brilliance of Backstage manager Jennifer White.
Hi, everyone. I'm so glad to be here on camera today.
The incredible support of Support Goddess and host of chat, Anissa Glaser-Bacon.
Might help if I unmute myself. Hi, everybody. I'm in Canton, Ohio, and I know nothing about football, even though the Hall of Fame's a mile from my house. Nothing.
And I will be hosting this conversation, as so many others, and I've called myself the merrymaking of Reverend Dr. Chris Davies. And here I am. So we're all a little nervous because we are literally lifting the veil and talking about how we do this work together. And then we're going to shift about halfway through and talk some about how are we measuring the impact that we're having, and how might you think about measuring your digital impact as well. So I know that we have a document full of show notes that we are going to put in the chat, and that's partially for us to be looking at and thinking like, okay, what comes next, and partially for you to look at so you can know, okay, what comes next. And if you're watching the recording, that document's going to be linked just below the YouTube. Throughout this conversation, you're going to notice that I'm referring to the two audiences that we have on the course of these webinar series. At this point, y'all, this is number 48. We have done 48 of these throughout the course of this year, which is wild. I just want to name that. I know the 50th is coming next week, and Tracy Howisbaway will be leading that one with some music stuff, which will be so fun. Additionally, so we talked about show notes. We talked about, we're going to talk through some best practices. I think that's what's coming next, right?
Before we get going, I would love to invite our audience that is here on Zoom with us to click the closed captioning option below. There are lots of options in there. We have lots of options to try for closed captioning. We picked a place. It's not perfect, but I highly encourage you, as you do digital ministry, that you think about how you can make your work accessible. it is a very limiting medium, and we want to do the best that we can to make sure that there's room at the table for everyone. So when you're looking at the closed captioning, you have an option for transcript, which can come alongside if you're at a laptop, and you can read as we're going. You can get it across the bottom of your screen in various sizes, and you can pick the contrast, which
I'm
is
seeing a
also
lot of
very helpful.
people say in the chat that they are not seeing that as an option right now.
Oh my goodness,
I don't see it
we will
either.
look into, I'll make sure that we can find that. Give us one moment.
because they're
Chris-
here.
Next.
That might be a Laurel thing because Laurel is the host of this conversation digitally.
We did receive a message that says that our closed captioning service is having a little bit of technical difficulties this afternoon. So we might get it at some point, and
We
I'm
will
working with
note
them behind
when
the
we get it.
scenes. We will.
Okay. Look at us modeling, us trying and failing and working through it. Look at that, right?
We can, if you really do need closed captioning for this time, go over to our YouTube video. YouTube does closed captionings on live videos in real time. They're not perfect, certainly, and they're probably even worse than someone typing them, but it will give you something. If you do need that, please join us on YouTube.
And I love that people are asking in the chat what resources we are using. I know Jennifer has an article that we recommend that has a whole bunch of different options in there as well. I will say that we at the National Setting are using a platform called Verbit. There are many different platforms recommended in that article. So having said that, I welcomed us all. I set the tone. You've got the Google Doc. You know where we're going to. I introduced everybody. I want to speak exactly to what, I want to invite Anissa to speak exactly to what she is doing. So we've got a couple of different roles when we do webinars. And, we recognize that sometimes these are not roles that people can always hold, but we want to name them as what we're doing. We have the host, which is kind of what I am doing. Jennifer's doing kind of like backstage digital, here goes where, cue this person, adjusting as we go. And then Anissa is supporting this. And what that means is...
So what I'm doing is I'm following the chat and commenting on questions that people have. I'm also, if there's questions that need to be directed to specific people, I will privately message them and give them that message. It's very important to have someone kind of following that, because as the host and the person who's participating in the webinar, it's really hard to do that. Actually, it's impossible to do that. And I have to say, during my own worship services, I work in a local church, and we also have someone who helps with the chat and other kind of background things, so that when I'm leading worship, I can just focus on being present and leading worship just as we do any other time. So what I'll be doing is reposting some of the links as questions come up that have already been answered, and then just trying to follow along and get what you need. And yes, someone has just asked if we can make it possible for them to save the chat.
That's a Laurel question.
That's why I'm putting
If
it out
you are
there.
looking for resources because you want to save the chat for resources, we will make sure that if you are on this Zoom call, that you'll get all the resources that we drop in this chat in a follow-up email. If you're watching on YouTube, after the fact, we're going to add them down to the description at the bottom right below.
Because sometimes what I also do is I add resources as people mention them that are things that we haven't prepared for, because some panelists will say, oh, and then there's this. And so I'm the one who goes and searches that out and adds that link in. So thank you. I'm glad we had that question. I'd forgotten.
As we're doing that, we want to share with you, like I said, this is webinar number 48. We've learned a lot in the time that we've been doing this, and we've compiled a document of best practices based on what we've learned. And Jennifer has put a lot of time and attention into compiling that document. So I want to invite that you can see it too. It is a Google document, as we're doing lately, because these things go so quickly. These things are changing so quickly that we have it as a Google Doc, so we can adapt and change it in real time as is needed. So that is going to go into the chat as well. And you notice that as the host, I'm giving verbal cues as to what's happening, so that the people on the call also know what's going on. In that best practice document, which you can see, you're also going to find a whole bunch of tech tips. Before we do that, though, I'm going to actually invite Laurel and Jennifer to speak to those tech tips. And this is usually what we do is for every 1 hour webinar, you see 1 hour of us talking, we've done probably about 3 to 4 hours of preparation. That's wild because we're doing this twice a week. Some of this has become, okay. We do 3 to 4 hours of preparation, and that includes calls with all the panelists. We have a 1 hour practice session where we use the webinar platform and orient the panelists, the people who are coming in, like, here's the Q&A. This is how the chat works. Here's where the on your screen, it'll be like, here's where the attendees are. Here's what's happening down at the bottom, and here's how we're going to be attentive as well as planning out. So in that 1 hour practice, we will also hear something that goes a little bit like this.
Thanks. So I'm getting a little bit of lag on my end. I hope I'm not talking over anyone. But I wanted to share a few things. I wanted to say everyone's audio is sounding great to me, and everyone's video looks great too. As always, when you can connect to a hardwired Ethernet connection instead of Wi-Fi, especially if you're on video, please prefer that method. If you've got an opportunity on your computer to click a do not disturb or something like that, that'll be the ideal way to interact. So you're not being disturbed. And then sometimes we do hear audio dings from like your Outlook or other email or notification things. So you want to make sure that those are turned off or kill the app, quit the program, whatever it might be. And then in addition to all of those things, if you've got audio or other devices, cell phones, stuff laying around you, put those on vibrate, put those on do not disturb. If you have other devices that are connected to your network, turn those off too. Give yourself a little bit more bandwidth, breathing room. Ideally, you can use some kind of external headset like a couple of us have. That way you can get the best audio and minimize the number of distractions. And I'm sure
Laurel, are my earrings making a noise?
Your earrings are making noise, Chris.
Every time.
Sometimes that'll happen for sure. And there are definitely some tips and tricks that you can do to minimize or to reduce that, but also sometimes there's nothing you can do and just try to hold still. And Jennifer, I'm sure I forgot something. Can you help me fill in?
Oh, absolutely. We check for awesome things like lighting. You can know if you are into photography like I am, you'll notice that I do have 2 lamps set up on me right now. You may not be able to afford one of those fancy halo lights, but we've all got a little bit of a desk light sitting around. Shoot it toward your face, get yourself bright and shiny. I would also bring about that to make sure that you have a space that is void of interruptions. Laurel was very worried earlier because someone is drilling behind her. But she happens to have some tech know-how and had some sound reduction and stuff put down. And I don't know about y'all, but I can't hear any drilling right now. I think you sound amazing, Laurel. So we look for things like that. In this document, you'll see that we gave some definitions of jobs. Clarity of role in this is very important so that you know what you're doing and not stepping on each other's toes. So when Anissa isn't around to run the chat, I run the chat. And if you noticed a few minutes ago, I instinctually started putting things in the chat, and then I realized that Anissa's doing it today and I don't have to. Again, that's about role clarity. Thank you.
That's all right. We're not usually both here, so.
Right, exactly. Other beautiful things that might be helpful. Having a layout, do you know what your script looks like? A brief outline is super helpful, especially if you have panelists coming on or guests that normally aren't in your group. So that they know what to expect, right? The pros call it like run a show, right? Like what questions am I about to be asked? There are also other things like make sure people show up early. That's super awesome for us because we can run troubleshooting issues like, you know, they got the wrong link. their phone doesn't work. We have backup things in here that help with like what happens if your audio cuts out? How do you call in? There's a link for that in there as well. So that's super awesome. What else do you got, Chris?
I was going to say it might even be worth going into how do you call in, because that's a good thing to know. I will say that we use the webinar platform of Zoom. That's a level up than what I know a lot of local churches use, particularly because our meetings tend to have a couple hundred people in them. However, I know that local churches are often in, you know, Zoom meetings where everybody is there and please mute and oh, there's somebody in the background. All of these things are happening. Somebody's calling me. That's rude. I'm doing something.
Hey, Chris, can you please silence your cell phone?
Yeah, and I just clicked something not right in the question and answer. So I need to answer something live because I messed that up. And that was, someone asked if it's better to get a separate unidirectional mic or headset. My answer is it depends. And it looks like that's Laurel's answer too. I don't have a headset today, but I often use a headset. I never use a headset when I'm leading worship. I do have a mic right next to me. I'm just not using it right now. It depends is a great answer. So sorry about that.
Also, what I would say, Anissa, is that you can actually kind of move to the next tab over and you can type an answer even if you've accidentally clicked go live.
I just found that.
See, we learn as we go, you know, and this is actually a lot of what we do behind the scenes in the prep time for everything, because you don't know until you know, as all of you have recently known through the shift in the everything for worship and beyond. You know, there's a lot of specific technological hardware questions, and what I want to name is that we're talking some about the software. That means the stuff that the platforms we're using, Zoom, how we're sharing screens, PowerPoint, the hardware, what actual mics you have. I don't feel necessarily qualified to give that information. And we're going to shift in about 2 minutes to talking some about metrics. You know, if you Google best mic for like podcast, that's a great thing. Yeah. Also, I'm going to do this thing where I mention something that I forgot to mention beforehand, and Anissa, who is supporting, is going to Google furiously. There is a group started by Bruce Ray's Chow on Facebook called Zoom Faith, and it's all about the people who are doing the technological back end of worship.
Yep, I'm on it.
What Zoom tips, tricks, what technological solutions, what hardware, any of that. You can ask any of those questions in there and have hundreds of people answer you with what they are using and how it works or doesn't. So I want to make sure we mention that.
And I think, just if I can say a broad overview, when you're doing things like video and audio, you want to go as wired as possible. That's going to give you the best, most consistent signal. So the question about AirPods, question about Wi-Fi or connectivity, just as much as you can wire, do that.
That's exactly why you don't see me in headphones today. I usually use Bluetooth headphones, and because I'm screen sharing that starter video, I wanted to make sure that my computer had the least amount to do while I shared that video. I wanted it to be crisp.
So having said all of that, we will continue to answer technical questions in the chat and in the Q&A with our fingers as we type out some of those answers as they come out. In the meantime, we're going to pivot a little bit. And those of you who are following along in our show notes will notice that it's exactly 10 minutes to the hour, which is when we were supposed to pivot, and talk some about how are we measuring these impacts? How are we, you know, a lot of you are local congregations in the United Church of Christ, and you may have been on the webinar last week at this time where we talked through the statistical profile, which was some of the information reported from 2019, but how are we going to report any of this for 2020? So having said that, I'm going to pass it over to Laurel and Phiwa, and Taylor's going to answer questions in the chat for this section.
Thanks so much, Chris. So I've got a little slideshow video that I've prepared that I can walk you through how to do, or how to go find these metrics on the specific platforms, because the analytics and the data of this kind of thing might be new to everyone who's still just learning how to use Facebook. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and here we are. So then I got to get to my script so I can narrate this most efficiently. So we're looking at measuring attendance for online worship services, and you'll certainly add in, if you have socially distanced services, add those to the totals, right? We're going to talk about your Facebook page first, and we're going to measure 1-minute views. And it's looking like, am I having some tech issues?
Totally. There's some blurred out sections in a big way.
Can you still hear me? I did get a notification that
Yes.
my headset was not working. Okay, I will say that I blocked out some identifying information since I'm using some local church accounts to show you what I'm doing. So you'll see that throughout the video. There might be some blurred sections, but you will be able to see kind of what I'm doing even with the blur. So let me go ahead and
Before
restart
you
my
do
video
that,
here.
I'm going to name some accessibility stuff, Laurel, is that if you are watching this on a phone or if you're on a very tiny screen, it's probably going to be really hard to see what's happening. It's also available on the YouTube, and you can go live screen you can like double click if you're not live screen. It'll take up the whole of your screen as well.
Thank you. So I'm going to go over here to this local church whose Facebook that I have administrative access to. We're going to click on See All Insights, and then we're clicking on Videos. I'm going to go ahead and collapse this because we don't really need that right now. And then we're going to scroll down to the worship video for this week. And this method will work to measure both live videos or pre-recorded videos. We click on View More Insights, and here you have it. 1-minute video views. You've got 152 attendees for this week. And so that's kind of how we go over that. Now, you might be live streaming from a personal profile, either for your church or as the pastor, and it's different. And we also don't recommend that you do this, but we do our statistical profile with the data we have, not the data we wish we had. When I was investigating this on the new Facebook interface, I couldn't find total views on desktop. So you might need to pull out your mobile device. And so once my screen flips, I'll show you a cute little video of my dog to show you how I found this information on a video on personal. So here it is on my timeline. That's my pup. And we're scrolling down and we see that this has 46 views on the bottom right there. And so that's going to be your number if you're using a personal Facebook profile instead of a church Facebook page. Many might be meeting on Zoom meetings and not webinars. And we're going to look at the total number of participants. So we've got two options for this. On Zoom platform, we start with go into our account management, and then reports. Here we're going to go to the daily usage reports, and then this is the worship service. Ignore the dates. We had 14 participants, and so that's your number. The alternative would be, since we know that sometimes multiple people or even entire families might be logging in on one user account, the second way to measure your attendance would have a tech deacon or other volunteer be your co-host, and they can go through and gallery view and manually count. And so that's one of the ways that you can do it if you don't have that access on Zoom platform. On YouTube, we want to look at total views, whether it's live or for pre-recorded. So we're going to YouTube. You click on this logo, which is sometimes a letter and not a logo. You'll click YouTube Studio right here. And then we click over to videos. We'll look first at the live streamed video over here on the live tab, and then you click analytics. Analytics. And here you see that this video has 79 views. That's going to be your attendance for a live stream YouTube video. And now we'll take a look at the number of views on a pre-recorded video on YouTube. We navigate back to channel videos, and then we click over to that uploads tab. And we navigate to our Sunday service, again, clicking analytics. And this one has 109. So that's how you would kind of see the difference between a live YouTube or a pre-recorded YouTube video. And then I want to talk a little bit about some churches who might have multiple platforms. So if you're maybe uploading it someplace after you've live streamed at another place, you can go back and use the methods I've already talked about and just add those together. If you are only doing live stream and not making the videos available after, this method that I'm about to show you will be helpful. It's going to be your maximum viewers. And I'm showing you through a multi-streaming software called Restream.io. That's what I have access to, but you'll have similar analytics wherever you are. I've logged in, click ellipsis, analytics, and then max viewers. And here we have the maximum was 130. I know that went a little bit quick for you, but remember that this will be made available afterwards, and I think we'll also be able to post it separately. That way you can go back and see it at your leisure and hopefully at a pace that works for you. Now, you might have something like an electronic friendship pad or a survey or a form that viewers are filling out, and we can talk about how to count that. You want to look at the number of total respondents. And so I've looked at a Google form, and we wanted to see, since we know families are tuning in, we want to go ahead and see what that looks like. So you see here, I've got this blurred out for privacy, but I've got folks' first name as they're signing in. And then they've also added the names of the people who are watching with them. And so you might have to go in and manually count that unless you've got some sort of form who's doing a little bit better work than this. We have kind of a lower tech Google form for this congregation. And you would just add those together. And you'll see after I type this in, there were 222 people who were watching, who self-identified that they were watching. And this is what you want to keep in mind, because not all of your attendees will fill out an electronic form, for one, but also many of the other metrics are certainly imperfect since they are measuring accounts or screens, but not the number of people watching. And since for it's a worship service, we're probably not going to see very many people rewatching the worship service or watching on multiple platforms. So luckily for all of us who are interested in these attendees, the most accurate number is going to be your larger number. So give us your larger number. And Phiwa, I think, has some notes for you about how to use this information, this data.
Yeah, thank you for the kind of the overview. I think that's a really a major this is a resource that we can go back to and look at, how it is we're going to be capturing these numbers. And so I want to be clear that that we've only gone through like a few of the platforms, like Facebook, YouTube, Zoom. And these are like the main ones that we are noticing that churches are engaging. We know they're not the only ones. There's some folk who are using like Venmo or WebEx or on their websites, or they're pre-recording and whatnot. And so the hope though is that you'll be able to just gather, some of the tools and the tricks that Laurel has shared, even, with that form to kind of get a sense for, who among your members are participating, and be able to report those things. Again, this gives you an opportunity to like know where to look, how to come up with like a fairly consistent way of measuring across time. This will be a very fascinating yearbook year. So in advance, the card team covets your prayers as we kind of sort through this and figure out, how best do we capture the many ways in which, what we used to do was disrupted by being in a pandemic, but also still being able to, uh, you know, capture what it is that we're doing and how we're doing it. So really too, I want to offer even just a word of just like of hope and peace for all of us, that we are with you. You are not on your own. We are learning as y'all are learning, with the technology changing as well. Like every time we do these webinars, Laurel will always remind us, do your updates before you start, right? Um, a, a lot of the world right now is actively and quickly trying to learn and respond to like the situation that we're in. And so that's really what we want to offer you all as well. And when it is time to solicit your numbers and your measurements and whatnot, we are going to be sure to have little cheat sheets, we'll call it, to help remind you about where you can find information about where to gather those numbers, and a place where you can add things that maybe are not represented in the boxes that we have, but to be able to still capture the measurements that you do have. And then we're continuing to still figure out, I guess, like how we can put that into a usable format that'll fit the yearbook. Otherwise it'll be like a 4-volume book, but tis what it is.
So as long as people are consistent in the ways in which they are measuring, and you can use some of this data. And I know one of the conversations we had at the foreground, for pre-chat, one of the conversations we had before was along the lines of a question if those numbers change over time. And I was focused on the chat. Did you already speak to that, Laurel?
Nope, I forgot about that. Thanks for the reminder. So when you're going through and gathering what would be your average attendance or however else you need to report it for the statistical profile, the numbers over time are not really going to change. So if you went today and tried to pull how many views, 1-minute views, you've got on your Facebook page, that's not going to be hugely different than it was right after people were done watching it. You don't need to so much worry about, oh, did I get it right after the video was on. It's no problem. You can always check those things at the end, and even batch it if that's convenient for you when you're filling out your statistical profile.
And go ahead, Phiwa.
Oh, I was just gonna comment on something I saw in the Q&A. Someone asking about if people have issues with sound on Facebook Live. So yes, there have been Sunday mornings where Zoom just decides to take a nap, and churches across the nation and the world, I guess, if they're in the same time zone, um, are in a panic. Like, so it's not just you, essentially. So again, like I was saying a little bit earlier, even these tech companies, Zoom did not realize that it was going to be like the main tool of communication for a whole world, when it used to be mostly, a tool of communication for like, certain business, businesses and organizations. And so they too are having to rapidly kind of reconfigure what they're doing and how they're doing it. And so that also means that indeed, their tech is not going to go well. So it's not just you or us, right? But it's the ones who are creating the systems as well. And there's laughter happening. I just see these muted squares of people's faces laughing.
Laurel said, raise your hand, your digital Zoom ham, if you've been personally victimized by Zoom's Saturday night updates.
Sorry for the
Absolutely.
Mean Girls joke. I thought I should put one in there someplace, though.
Yeah, it's like they don't care about, us Sunday users. Like, you don't have just a Monday through Friday clientele Zoom. Let's get it together. Who do we need to talk to?
So as people are answering with their fingers the questions that are coming through the chat, and I will say again, with this many people on a webinar, as you ask questions in the chat, we often miss them because the chat moves fast, particularly as people often send the questions just to panelists. So our chat moves way faster than your chat. So if you want everyone to be able to answer your question, make sure you send it to all panelists and attendees. And if you want a question that you want to make sure we see, put it in the Q&A, which for you is probably about here on your screen, like over that way and down there, you'll see the little Q&A, and you can pop it in there, and then we'll see it, be able to track it, and actually have access to the questions thereafter, so we can see what kind of things we're about to do. So before we move into answering those questions pretty consistently throughout the rest of the time, I do want to offer a couple of things are about to happen. Laurel's going to talk about promotion, and then we're going to do an experiment together on the live with a website called Menti, but we'll get there. So Laurel first, and then Menti.
Thanks so much, Chris. So part of my job at the national setting is the social media specialist. So I do a lot of the promotions on social media, and I wanted to share a couple of other ways that you can be sharing your digital event, your Sunday services, and get more people attending, or just reminding people who will attend but maybe need a little reminder. So of course, beforehand, you can create a Facebook event. You can put posts out on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, any other social media platforms you might have. Certainly, if you have an email list, send the information out via that. And then another good idea with the email is to send out a reminder 15 minutes before you're going to start, because that's a great reminder. People are, on their phones eating breakfast. Oh no, I almost forgot. It's 15 minutes to service time. Better log in or check over there. And if you already use a service to send texts, like cell phone message texts, you can send a text reminder either like right when the stream starts or a minute or so, or when the pre-recorded video is available. Of course, if you're not using that yet, that might be something that is either cost prohibitive or just too much for your staff, but I mentioned that as an opportunity. And then, since this kind of thing, we know we're not all watching together necessarily. So if you have a video that's been recorded or it's available sometime after the live stream, you can share it again on social media. And you can take the video and you can ask a question with it to help more people engage with it. So an open-ended question like, what part of the service connected to you most this week? And people will hopefully share. And that's also an opportunity to do some pastoral care. If you have a midweek email that you send out, go ahead and share the link there as well. And then specifically for worship services, this is kind of a little bit different for another kind of event. But for a worship service, you can post the video, or if you're savvy enough to have an audio version as like a podcast, and then even a text version of the sermon and Bible readings, go ahead and post that as another post or article or blog, if that's the terminology you're using, on your church website. Kind of a lot of ways to get people involved and get eyes on it. If we see something 7 times, we remember it. And so that's kind of the main ways, and there certainly are others as well. Thanks.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point too, So I think one of the good things that uh we can extract, I guess, from having to adjust everything we know and have known, is really just to understand that, before we go to church, the pastor might preach, and then the sermon goes into the air for those who are there, and then everybody leaves, and then that's where the sermon remains, right? But now this gives us an opportunity, right, to be able to capture the essence and the words, that are shared on whatever day it happens, right? And it gets to stay on longer than just those who have gathered, right? And so so I know not everybody does live or whatever else, right? But there are ways that you can still record the video. And once you've shared it with the folk, you can add that to YouTube and put it on Facebook and put it in different places, right? Where it just takes a time of like re-uploading stuff. Or even, an early survey we've gotten, there's some people who are just doing audio or just written, right? And so those are still ways that, like you can do audio and video and written on your website, or you can do audio with images that you may want, and put that kind of as a running video so people can still encounter that.
Thank you. So I want to be cognizant of our time. Some of you may have noticed me doing this, which is a backstage cue that we often use, where when we are in gallery view, even though we usually do speaker view, this is a be attentive to finish the thought that you're having now, but I'm going to tell you with my smile and love for everything that you're saying, and awareness that we have a lot to cover in a short amount of time. So thank you for allowing me to demonstrate that, Phiwa. I really didn't need to, but I wanted to.
Oh, I could have still had more to say. It's fine.
What I want to make sure that we talk about is we want to get some feedback from you. So we're going to try an experiment before we go into the Q&A and look through the chat and answer more specific questions as they're coming up. So this experiment is with a free service called Menti.com, and Taylor is going to share her screen and we're going to try this. So to do this, what you're going to need is your cell phone next to you, or to open a browser at the same time that you're in conversation. For those of you that are watching the recording, you can see this in action, but it will not work in the recording. So this is a live experiment. So if you go to Menti.com and then put in the code 776012.8, then this will come up for you. And you can answer the question, what has been your favorite webinar so far overall? I said we've done 48. You know, it may be this one if this is your first webinar. If you've been to a handful, you could name what your favorite one throughout is. And as you answer the question in your cell phone or in another browser window or somewhere else along the way, what you'll find is it comes right up. So in entering that code, that will help you get there. Number 48. There's a lot that have come, and we are curious about which one has been your favorite so far. You all. Now you're buttering us up.
Chris, can I just add that I have used this in my local worship services. So I have used this with my congregation, my small, 40-member congregation. So this is a great way to get them talking, especially outside the chat. And also because it's visual, it adds another second piece to that.
So as you're entering that in, you'll see your enterings scrolling up and through. Whatever it is that you've put on will also show up in that particular way through. The free version, you're allowed 2 slides. So you will see us use 2 slides in the midst of what we're doing here. And I'm trying to answer it too, but multitasking while doing the Q&A, the chat, and this is not going to work. So I'm going to put it aside. Oh, lots coming through. I imagine there's probably still some more. We have lost a Taylor. So, and Taylor's coming back on. In the context of another webinar, part of my job as host is to not say those things out loud, but instead to kind of redirect what we are doing. And you might have noticed us do this in the webinar we did on Thursday when we were talking about prayers, and in the middle of Tracy Howisboy's prayer, she dropped off and we kind of redirected. So having someone who can kind of name what we're doing in a way that is instructive in the midst of it has been really helpful. Taylor, good catch. So we're going to move to the next question. And as that's happening, your screen will just refresh to the next question. So what content do you want more of? Keeping in mind that this is about both our Thursday spiritual webinars and our Tuesday educational webinars. When you're thinking about what it is that you want to see more of for the whole of the denomination, not just the tech skills, like what is it that would be helpful for you in the context of local churches, as lay leaders, as clergy, as people trying to figure out how to be in 2020, where this is a year where we are all experiencing this collective traumatic experience and trying to figure out what are our next steps when everything that we've reached towards in a lot of cases isn't working the way it was. Let's see what comes in for that question.
So Chris, my mentee is cycling and saying, please let the presenter show the next slide, but it's on our share screen, but for some reason, I think that's why we're not getting answers. It's actually not coming up on my web.
Same.
All right.
I don't know if that has to do with Taylor popping off and popping on.
Probably not. It's the same code.
Yep.
Stuck on the first question. Interesting. Maybe, have we tried turning it off and turning it on again? Not the screen share, the whole of it.
Hey, that was my line.
While that is happening, I'm going to invite you to, instead of using the Menti, which is a good tool to demonstrate, we're also going to demonstrate a pivot by saying.
It just came up.
It just came up. Great. So we're going to keep it staying with that. If you are unable to access the technology of Menti, you can also put in the chat to all panelists and attendees, not just to us, because we want everyone to be able to participate in the conversation. Like, let us know, what is it? What content would you like more of? The safety protocol. I'm glad somebody said that. I will say it's hard for me not to put my faith info hat on because I'm like, oh, these resources exist. Let me tell you about them. But for the indoor worship protocol, I know the insurance board has a lot of very clear specifications about what that is or is not. So I would recommend you go there for that one. And we could totally have them on and talk about it and think about it. before the end of 2020.
There's a really good question in the chat. Someone is asking, does Menti keep this information so that we can look at it later?
Anissa, that might actually be a question best for you because you've used it more.
Yes, I have a paid Menti. I don't know if it does for the free version. But on the paid Menti, yes, it does.
The free version allows for you to have a screenshot, sort of like a PDF of what you have.
Okay.
Thank you, Taylor. Planning for the future. So as those things continue to come in, we will have access to them and we can look at them as we continue to plan what's coming out. I will name that at some point fairly soon, not now, but before the end of September, God willing and the creek don't rise, we will also have the webinar will lead to a survey where you can tell us some of this information and we can be attentive and assess what we're doing in alignment with what is really necessary for you in local churches and clergy and chaplains, and holding this care spiritually for a community that is going through so much, no matter where you are. There is so much going on right now. So as it is our work to help equip you with the things that you need to make sure that you're able to do that as best as you can. So having said that, we are going to take a moment and look through some of the questions, whether they're coming in via the chat or through the Q&A. A lot of them have been answered because everybody is technological and brilliant and doing that. But if you have a question that hasn't been answered, now would be a really good time to put that into the Q&A. While you're preparing that and typing, let me say, we are doing this because of your donations. We are able to do work like this because of how you help support the whole of the church, and that comes through your church's wider offering, and that can also come directly through texting UCC to 41444. You see Jennifer's imitating my ask here, which is totally fine. And that goes to the annual fund of the United Church of Christ, and that helps us to do work like this and to pull it off in such a way that we are continuing to provide excellent resources for you and for the wider church. So thank you to those of you that have donated. We really appreciate that, and it enables us to continue going with the creation of beautiful resources. I also want to name, as those questions are coming in, that we've got incredible webinars coming up. And as I usually do, I start talking about that and then have to go and find my calendar to make sure I mention the right things. Having said that, on Thursday, 2 days from today, we're going to be talking with a handful of preachers about the sermons that keep preaching. One of the things that we are very well aware of right now is that it's so hard with all of these different stressors, that clergy in general, our wellness is really at stake. Many of us have thought about all sorts of alternative paths. Many of us are holding on barely to the work that we have to do consistently in spaces where people are accessing the highest forms of communication that they have, which sometimes is the nitpicky, like, but did this happen during worship? And then, you know, when you pour everything into something and get the nip, and then it all falls apart. All of which to say, we're going to talk about the sermons that keep preaching. We're going to kind of go back to some of those core messages of faith that come out in different ways for different people over and over and over on Thursday. And we're going to issue an invitation at the end of that for you to hold your clergy in prayer, invite some of those best practices, invite some of those greatest hits, I should say, the ones that you remember, and invite them to preach again if they have access to them. Not everyone is a manuscript preacher, I will say that. And also, some of those themes continue to come back. So that's what we're going to do on Thursday. Next week, I saw somebody saying, what content do you want more of? Came music. And I will say that both of the webinars next week are about music, one of which on Tuesday is about the UCC Musicians Association and strengthening some of those bonds. And the other one is about God and music and deepening spiritual reflection through music. as that is happening, music is one of the things that's hard because we have to be attentive to copyright all throughout, particularly as everything we do in worship in many times is on blast. The copyright is also on blast. So as your church is being attentive, there's a couple of resources that we have included in the best practices document about legal considerations for worship, and a webinar that we did with General Counsel Heather Kimmel speaking to some of those legal considerations as well. So that was my call to offering and announcements.
I think that's what makes the music for me on these webinars so moving and important, because we have gone through a lot of hoops and a lot of legal things to be able to bring the music to us. And as someone who lives theater, eats theater as often as I can, these moments where we get the music is just like the best part of being behind the scenes. It really is.
Someone's misbehaving, sorry. So also there are multiple websites where you can get background sound that is free to use. So you can search that out, and maybe Jennifer, I'll give you some links for things like that to send to people, just for, just like background mood type things.
I will also name that in the worship document that is put out by Faith Info, we have done a lot of the background research for what is the music that you can share already, and have a list of that that's available as well. And will likely be in the chat pretty soon because I've mentioned it, and you beautiful humans are brilliant. So another question came through about the resources regarding copyright. They are in the copyright resources are in the best practices document. Jennifer, is that the one that just came through? Yep. So the most recent Google Doc that you can see in the chat is where those resources live. And there's 2 webinars we're talking about. In addition, they are also in text on the, I believe they are on the Coronavirus in the Church page in the worship document where we share everything. Sue Blaine is here in the chat, and she may say differently to all panelists and attendees, in which case I would trust her expertise and wisdom. And I see that Kenneth is saying, let's write new music. We will. I'm calling you out because I'm going to call you in for one of these, Kenneth, to do more music with us again. I know we did together in one of the prayer services, the early ones that we did, but we are long overdue for more. So what other questions do you have that we might answer in the few minutes that we have left? We're watching the chat and we have our eye on the Q&A.
So I was just thinking back to like the beginning part when y'all were talking about, how to set this up. One thing I do when I show up, is like, I know I lose track of time when I start speaking. It's like what y'all saw Chris doing this earlier, especially if they're like, there's multiple things happening. I try to say in advance, like, hey, look, when I have about like 7 minutes, just tug your ear or something, right? So like, just kind of work on like different tips and tricks of like, however it is that you can be helped, to try to keep time as well. And someone earlier was talking about, sound and whatnot. Another thing that I do before every meeting, even if it's like with Chris Davies, just me and her, like I will do a test video by myself, a Zoom call by myself, just to make sure like there's nothing in my teeth, my background is set up right, and even I would say record briefly and then listen to your video, and then you can like hear what others might be hearing from your own video too. And I look foolish doing it, and I'm okay with that.
I'm glad to know I'm not the only one who does it. Thank you, because I thought I was being a little neurotic, but no, I'm so happy I'm not the only one doing it.
I want to reiterate that this is a webinar, like all of the webinars that we've done, that is recorded. You can watch it thereafter, and especially if we've gone over something really quickly and you want to revisit it, you want to send it out to your worship team, you want to send it out to your deacons to say, I need you to understand how much work it actually is to do this every week. This is a good webinar to send their way and say, look at how these folks are doing it, and there's a whole bunch of them, and this is just me. And I'm saying this with intention because I know that sometimes, as if you are one of the people putting on worship on Sunday mornings, you're putting a lot in that isn't often seen, and congregations are starting to have that expectation about timing as we start to have more conversations about what are we going to do collectively in your local communities. So it you know, for us, it is a team. And like I said, for every hour of content that we've put forward in front of you, we've done about 3 to 4 hours of work beforehand to make sure that it is excellent. We've planned it out. And that what shows up is something that is hopefully, prayerfully, something that is educational or restores your spirit or gives you something to hold on to in the midst of that, which is so much of which is uncertain. So before we close out, I want to invite all of the folk here to offer any closing thoughts or things that you may want to share or forgot to mention before, or if you've got nothing else, then leave them with a blessing. Always leave them with a blessing. We say over and over, we are praying for every single one of you every single day, and that is true. I hold the United Church of Christ, our local congregations, our clergy, our lay leaders, and beyond, our partners, our wider church folk in prayer every day, because this is a time where, for me, we have to. I don't know how I would do this without my faith. Having said that, what closing thoughts do you all have? I'm going to start. One of the things we often do in Zoom meetings is this, where I'll say, I'm going to start with Jennifer and ask her to invite in the next person.
Oh, absolutely. I want to encourage you to aim for excellence and not perfection. This is not something that we can do perfectly. We're all learning. It is ever changing. It is hard. Know that it's hard. Even here, even where I'm standing, you know, I'm in all of these Facebook groups with you, learning with you. Know that aim for excellence and not perfection. Laurel, my friend, next.
Thank you, Jennifer. I was going to say that if no one else did. So thanks for saying that. So I can leave you with another piece. Consistency is key, right? That is what anyone who does social media will tell you. That is the same no matter what platform you're on. And it also is a matter of pastoring. When you show up consistently, whether it's as your church or as a pastor on a live streaming or pre-recorded worship service, that is what builds relationship. That is what builds the kingdom. That is what brings people to Christ. Consistency and love. And I want to popcorn over to Anissa.
And Merton, because this is where he is now. My encouragement, both as a member of this team and as a local church pastor, is to be fearless and faithful. Go ahead and try, because I guarantee you something amazing will happen, whether you think it succeeds or fails or not. And don't be afraid to do it with a dog in your lap, because, you know, sometimes that's just what you got to do. I'll popcorn over to Phiwa.
Hey, sorry, I was like reading a question here. Charlotte, can we link up after this? Is that a thing that could be done? Okay.
Absolutely. What is a good email for people with metrics questions to ask? Is that Laurel? And then data hub questions and statistical profile questions. I think those are two different places to ask.
Yeah, is Taylor still? Taylor, could you maybe like drop our emails in there for like card specific
Definitely.
things? Thank you so much. I think it's my turn to speak. Yeah, so I'm a programmer on the side, you know, so I enjoy code and writing and all things tech, right? And so I know not everybody here is. And so I just want to assure you, you know, especially in this denomination, we know that God is still speaking. And I want to assure you that God is still speaking in multiple languages, including machine language. Even if you don't know it, God does. And so God is in those digital spaces even before we get there. And so let us be assured that, you know, as imperfectly, as messily, as, you know, uncertain like this feels right now, and perhaps in the next months ahead, God is already at our next moment. And I think that is a word that we truly, can hopefully eradicate some of the anxieties that we have about that. We know that this is our God who is present in all of our spaces.
Taylor, do you want to add anything in?
Amen, Phiwa. I'm just going to say, I just say, do the best you can. You'll get better and more comfortable with time and more practice. That's my motto. Just do what you can. Do the best you can.
And you all hear my voice every Tuesday and Thursday, so I'm going to ask Reverend Anissa to pray us out.
See, forgot to unmute myself. Let us enter into the spirit of prayer. Loving and gracious God, we give you thanks and praise for any opportunity to gather. And in all the ways that we are able to do so, we also give you thanks for your inspiration and love. Most importantly, I give you thanks today for the gathered gifts of those who have presented here, all who have attended and have asked questions. We each have a giftedness that we bring to this present moment. So we thank you for this sacred space that is not really a space at all, but is openness, marked by a spirit of intention and the fullness of our own breath. May your breath combine with ours so that the Spirit continues to use us and mold us and the whole world into a new creation. Amen.
Amen. I'm going to share my screen to our final slide. Make sure the sound is on. Things I've forgotten before. I'll play from there. Can you see that? And, okay. Oh, okay. We did it. Ah.
We're still live, right? You told us to stay on. We're
Bye,
still all live.
Good luck.
I can lock the meeting and then just kick everyone out.
Just end it.
See you, everyone.